comes by step.
The long and meticulous study and debate of which this Universal Declaration of Human Rights is the product means that it reflects the composite views of the many men and governments who have contributed to its formulation. Not every man nor every government can have what he wants in a document of this kind. There are, of course, particular provisions in the Declaration before us with which we are not fully satisfied. I have no doubt this is true of other delegations. And it would still be true if we continued our labors over many years. Taken as a whole, the delegation of the United States believes that this is a good document, even a great document, and we propose to give it our full support. On this, the Soviet amendment of Article 22 introduces new elements into the article without improving the committee text, and again introduces specific reference to discrimination. As was repeatedly pointed out in Committee 3, the question of discrimination is comprehensively covered in Article 2 of the Declaration, so that its restatement elsewhere is completely unnecessary and also has the effect of weakening the comprehensive principles stated in Article 2. The new article proposed by the Soviet delegation is but a restatement of state obligation, which the Soviet delegation attempted to introduce into practically every article in the Declaration. It would convert the Declaration into a document stating obligations on states, thereby changing completely its structure as a statement of principle to serve as a common standard of achievement for the members of the United Nations. The Soviet proposal for deferring consideration of the Declaration to the fourth session of the Assembly requires no comment. An identical text was rejected in Committee 3 by a vote of 6 in favor and 26 against. We are all agreed, I'm sure, that the Declaration, which has been worked on with such great effort and devotion and over such a long period of time, must be approved by this Assembly at this session. In giving our approval to the Declaration today, it is of primary importance that we keep clearly in mind the basic character of the document. It is not a treaty, it is not an international agreement, it is not and does not purport to be a statement of law or a legal obligation. It is a declaration of basic principles of human rights and freedoms, to be stamped with the approval of the General Assembly by formal vote of its members, and to serve as a common standard of achievement for all people of all nations. We stand today at the threshold of a great event, both in the life of the United Nations and in the life of mankind. This Universal Declaration of Human Rights may well become the international Magna Carta of all men everywhere. We hope its proclamation by the General Assembly will be an event comparable to the proclamation of the Declaration of the Rights of Man by the French people in 1789, the adoption of the Bill of Rights by the people of the United States, and the adoption of comparable declarations at different times in other countries. At a time when there are so many issues on which we find it difficult to reach a common basis of agreement. It is complex field of human rights. This must be taken as testimony of our common aspiration, first voiced in the Charter of the United Nations, to live men everywhere to a higher standard of life and to a greater enjoyment of freedom. Man's desire for peace lies behind this declaration. The realization that the flagrant violation of human rights by Nazi and fascist countries sowed the seeds of the last world war has supplied the impetus for the work which brings us to the moment of achievement here today. The spirit of that man must have freedom in which to develop his full stature and through common effort to raise the level of human dignity. We have much to do to fully achieve and to assure the rights set forth in this declaration. And having been put forward, the moral backing of 58 nations will be a great step forward. In conclusion, I feel that I cannot do better than to repeat the call to action by Secretary Marshall in his opening statement to this Assembly. Let this third regular session of the General Assembly approve by an overwhelming majority the Declaration of Human Rights as a standard of conduct for all.
All human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. In perhaps the most resonant and beautiful words of any international agreement, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights promises to all the economic, social, political, cultural, and civil rights that underpin a life free from want and fear. These human rights are not country-specific. They are not a reward for good behavior or particular to a certain era or social group. They are the inalienable entitlements of all people at all times and everywhere, 365 days a year. They are the rights of people of every color, from every race and ethnic group, whether or not they have disabilities, citizens or migrants, no matter their sex, their class, their caste, their creed, their age, or sexual orientation. The commitments made to the people of the world through the Universal Declaration are in themselves a mighty achievement, discrediting the tyranny, discrimination, and contempt for human beings that have so painfully marked human history. And since the Declaration was adopted, countless people have gained greater freedom. Violations have been prevented. Independence and autonomy have been attained. Many people, though not all, have been able to secure freedom from torture, unjustified imprisonment, summary execution, enforced disappearance, persecution, and unjust discrimination, as well as fair access to education, economic opportunities, rich cultural traditions, and adequate resources and healthcare. They have obtained justice for wrongs and national and international protection for their rights through the strong architecture of the international human rights legal system. The power of the Universal Declaration is the power of ideas to change the world. It tells us that human rights are essential and indivisible, 365 days a year. Every day is Human Rights Day, a day on which we work to ensure that all people can gain equality, dignity, and freedom.